Welcome to the Three Martini Lunch. Grab a stool next to Greg Columbus of Radio America and Jim Garrity of National Review. Three martinis coming up.
Hey, really glad you're with us for the Wednesday edition of the Three Martini Lunch. We do have a good martini, but overall it's a really bad day for the Republican Party, which we'll get into in due course. Both of the first two martinis deal with that. In fact, really all three, if we're going to be honest about it. But let's start with the good. Last week, we talked about the fantastic story, or at least very well-reported story from Jennifer Von Lahr of Red State, about the financial dysfunction at the Republican National Committee, how they were only having about $8 million on hand, and how they were wasting money on consultants and limos and flowers and office supplies to the tune of $300,000 a year. Well, tack on all to that, of course, is the fact that Republicans haven't had a good cycle in a very long time. You had Glenn Youngkin in 2021. That's about it. 2018, Republicans easily lost the House. 2020, not only did Trump lose, but they managed to, in the aftermath of that, lose both Georgia Senate seats and lose control of the Senate. And in 2022, yes, the House was brought back by the slimmest of majorities, which we'll get to in the second martini. But the Senate, Republicans lost a seat, and overall Republicans did not do nearly as well as expected. So now Ronna, Romney, McDaniel has apparently decided to step down after the South Carolina primary on February 24th. A little bit of confusion on Tuesday night, Jim. First, it sounded like she was out immediately, and then your colleague, Zach Kessel, said nothing's changed, and then it appears that she will, in fact, step down after South Carolina. So after 3+ cycles with not much to show for it in terms of money, organization, or election results, which is the main job, Ronna Romney is gone, which is good. The question is whether the shambles are so bad that it's going to be tough for anybody to pick him back up. So this is the good martini that she's finally gone, but it's overdue.
The good martini is the potential for addition by subtraction. You remove someone who is a potential serious liability. I looked it up and I read about it in today's Morning Jolt. Ronna Romney McDaniel she's now been in a little bit more than 7 years in the job of RNC chair. That is the longest since 1904. Longer than Reince Priebus, longer than anybody else who's been in that. So you'd ordinarily, this person must be good at their job. There is not much evidence of this. And I think probably one of the good examples of on top of everything you laid out there, towards late January, there was this resolution introduced to the RNC by David Bossie, a longtime friend and ally of Trump, who's a member of the RNC, that wanted to declare Trump the nominee, the presumptive nominee. If McDaniels had any objections to this, she hit it very well. She may well have not personally thought it, but there was no sense that this was this. Now, it was eventually withdrawn. Trump himself jumped onto Truth Social and eventually said, but people were pointing out, this was actually 2 contests have gone by so far, right? Now, here's the thing. I think Trump is extremely likely to be the Republican nominee, barring some health issue or something really extraordinary happening. I don't even think it wouldn't happen before he clinches the nomination, but I don't even think a criminal conviction would deter most Republican voters from voting for Trump. Also, that resolution said that it was mathematically impossible for Nikki Haley to win the nomination. That is not the case. Now, I know that math is not the specialty of a whole bunch of people in politics, but when you've only had 2 contests and only 62 delegates allocated, that does not mean that it's mathematically impossible for somebody else to win the nomination. And so you just got to look at over what is the purpose of the Republican National Committee? What is its job? We thought the job of the Republican National Committee was to elect Republicans. It's not a really lousy job at that. When you spend time saying, let's introduce this imaginary resolution that does not actually do anything, but it just would make Trump feel good by declaring that he is the winner and that we don't need to hold these 48 other primaries. Your purpose is to make somebody feel good. You're not actually focusing on this. And the reporting by Jennifer Von Lahr further indicates that the Republican National Committee is operating like this royal court that it likes to spend money on flowers and it likes to spend money on media consultants and limousines, not so much updating the voter rolls and not so much texting and transferring it to state parties and other stuff like that. We're not that into electing Republicans. That's kind of a side gig we do. Mostly we try to make the former president feel good. And that's not, you get what you put your effort into. Romney McDaniel has done a terrible job. There's no reason she should have been in this job for 7 years. Probably should have gone a couple cycles ago. The downside is we don't know who's going to replace her. And if the criteria is we want the best candidate who's most loyal to Trump, you're not going to get the best candidate. You need the best candidate whose job is who's a good fundraiser, who's a good manager, who's a good strategist, who can switch over to plastic flowers, maybe, so you don't have to replace just basic, management is a much more important skill in this, and we'll see who it ends up being. The prospect of change, there's at least the possibility of improvement. But if the top, because Trump will be effectively, if Trump says, this is the person I want to be the RNC chair, the majority of RNC members will go along and say, yes, hunky-dory, this is terrific. So we will see. It's the prospect of anything good is all it takes to make the good martini today, Greg.
Yeah, after the 2022 midterms, two names floated. One actually ran against Ronna, Romney, McDaniel, and that was Harmeet Dillon. The other name that came up quite a bit was Lee Zeldin, who had just recently run much better than expected against Kathy Hochul up in New York. But just to show you how soap opera-ish this Republican Party is right now, did you see who Matt Gaetz thinks would make an excellent RNC chairman? Kevin McCarthy. Not for speaker, but RNC chairman would be great.
Is this some sadistic desire to punish him or something, to put him into a thankless job? Or
I don't know.
I mean, considering McCarthy's fundraising network, that actually might not be the worst idea in the world.
I agree. That's just, you turn the party into complete dysfunction.
You really hate him. You make him party chair twice.
Here's almost no money, and good luck. We have what is it now? 10 months? No, 9 months.
If Gaetz actually got McCarthy to be chairman of the RNC, do you think he'd wait like 2 weeks before beginning a movement against him?
You couldn't script it. That's the thing that I just keep saying as we watch politics, and we'll say it even more in the second martini for sure. All right, let's talk about our great sponsor for today, and that is 4Patriots. Go to 4patriots.com/martini, and while you're there, get a free solar panel with the purchase of the Patriot Power Generator 2000X. You'll also get free shipping on orders over $97. Remember, the Patriot Power Generator 2000X, this new solar generator, worth its weight in gold because it has double the capacity and is expandable so you can run the big appliances like your fridge even longer. It's got 12 outlets, including 4 AC, to power more devices at once, plus 2 USB-C outlets that can charge your phone 20 times faster than a regular plug. Also, don't forget about the last chance items that are still on sale right now, especially the Patriot Pure products, including the UV phone sanitizer, the UV wand, the sanitation solution machine, and the disinfecting power bank. Visit 4patriots.com/martini to get your Patriot Power Generator 2000X with free solar panel included. Plus, get free shipping on orders over $97. Save more and get peace of mind now by going to the number 4patriots.com/martini. That's 4patriots.com/martini. All right, Jim, let's talk about the House Republicans now. I'm sure many of our listeners were wincing and grimacing yesterday on two issues of great significance on the House floor. First of all, after a failed attempt to impeach Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas several weeks ago, this time they went through regular order, got articles through the Homeland Security Committee. It looked like they had the votes, or I assume they thought they had the votes, or they wouldn't have brought it to the floor. That's kind of basic 101 in leading a Republican conference in the majority. And then they actually got to the floor. And then 3 Republicans voted against it in earnest. Ken Buck of Colorado, Tom McClintock of California, and Mike Gallagher of Wisconsin. They thought they were still going to win by 1 vote. And then, like it was almost scripted out of a movie, Texas Democrat Al Green, who had just had surgery, shows up wearing hospital scrubs and no socks to vote against the impeachment. So then it's tied, it can't pass, and then a 4th Republican, Blake Moore of Utah, voted against it so he could bring it back for another vote at another time. The Republicans are hoping to do it when Steve Scalise is well enough from his cancer treatment to get back on Capitol Hill, but a huge embarrassment, only amplified by the fact that they sent the speaker back up there to announce that they lost the vote. And then after that, they wanted to pass a standalone legislation to support military aid to Israel. The Democrats didn't like this because they wanted to be part of Ukraine, and also the border bill that the Senate is basically deciding to scuttle at this point. So because they rushed it to the floor, it needed 2/3 to pass. They didn't get that. They had a majority, but only 250. Most Democrats voted against it, as did a couple dozen Republicans, and so it didn't get to the number needed. So another embarrassment for the Republicans here. And Jim, when Kevin McCarthy has resigned, and Johnson of Ohio has resigned to become president of Youngstown State, and Steve Scalise is getting cancer treatment. Your margin for error is very slim. There's only so much you can do there, but what you can do is make absolutely sure you've got the votes before you do stuff like this, because when it doesn't work out, it's way more embarrassing than not voting at all.
Yeah, I don't know if Speaker Johnson had the attitude yesterday, close enough. We'll probably make it, but that did not turn out well for him. I would actually say 3, and I've been thinking about we talked about the effort to tie the immigration bill, the effort to tie funding for Ukraine, for Taiwan, and for Israel to a variety of changes to border policies and asylum, and this was a deeply flawed bill. This was barely half a loaf. We all the criticisms were valid. But I just want to point out that the 2 scenarios that are most likely right now are that there will be some sort of separate bill for Israel funding, for Taiwan funding, and for Ukraine funding, in which nothing changes on the border, in which the whole point of House Republicans was, no, we know you guys want Ukraine funding. We're going to tie border changes to that was our leverage. That maybe they get nothing. Maybe that nothing changes on the border policy, and they get this through. Or no bill for any of this foreign stuff gets passed, and then there's no funding for Ukraine, but also no funding for Israel, but also this funding for Israel came up after the 10/7 attack, meaning that since October we've been talking about trying to send additional Iron Dome funding to Israel. You notice it's February. We still haven't gotten it there. We're now knocking on the door of 4 months of haggling over this. And no money for Taiwan. Oh, by the way, we're well behind on our arms sales to Taiwan that we promised to give them to deter a Chinese invasion. Those are both really bad scenarios. So under the deal, you would have at least gotten something. So I just want to recognize that there was a risk to shooting down declaring this bill dead on arrival. On the Israel one, in theory, it's a good idea to say, all right, Biden, we're going to send this straight to you, Israel aid, up or down. Biden said that was playing politics. No, I don't think it's playing politics to say, here's the bill and here's what it does. What it says is that Biden really wanted to get Ukraine aid and a bunch of other stuff attached to the Israel bill because there was bipartisan consensus for it. But apparently not a broad enough bipartisan consensus, or at least there were a bunch of Republicans. And again, these are self-inflicted wounds. I can understand times where you introduce something to the floor because you want to make it a tough vote for the other guys, or you want to be able to say in a campaign ad that they voted against, Israel funding or something like that. But this really left Speaker Johnson looking not knowledgeable about his caucus and just, foolish. And then on the entire effort against Mayorkas. Does Mayorkas deserve it? Absolutely. He's done a terrible job for 3 years. He's lied through his team. I'm the last guy who's going to defend Mayorkas. I also would recognize, though, let's say you get rid of Mayorkas, whoever gets appointed by President Biden and confirmed by Senate Democrats isn't going to be dramatically different in their philosophy and outlook on this issue. I don't think you get rid of Mayorkas, he gets replaced by an immigration hawk. So you add this up. This was always very limited reward, and it felt like it was more of a, we're going to get you, without a great deal of strategic thinking about what the second step is. And so now, the outlook right now is we probably have no major changes to immigration, border policy, asylum policy, all that stuff for the remaining of the year. That might help Trump win in 2024. It might not. I think it's safe to say this is not an easy election with all of the baggage Trump brings to this. And you're basically betting everything on this idea that you're going to have President Trump and a Republican Senate and a solid House majority, because we're seeing the consequences of a very narrow House majority. That's an enormous gamble. And if you don't get that, then nothing gets changed on the border for another couple of years, and things just get worse. I was going to say, I know Democrats wake up every morning really wanting to beat the Republicans, but nobody beats Republicans better than the Republicans do.
That's clearly the case. And Republicans aren't great at messaging either, because, of course, the second this bill came out in the Senate, like we talked about yesterday with Al Sharpton, and Joe Biden said the same thing yesterday after we recorded, if you don't want this, it's your fault that this is happening, not me for reversing and issuing 94 executive orders that let the floodgates open. But Republicans, after they passed H.R. 2, which was their border security bill, and the Democrats said, well, it's not going anywhere in the Senate. And so that was it. Nobody kept pushing it anymore. So they could have easily said, hey, if you really want to solve this problem, Senate, you got a piece of legislation waiting for you there. And they didn't. The media would have obviously sided with the Senate version because that's what they do. But it's frustrating that there wasn't a bigger push for that at the time. The other thing I learned from your morning jolt today, Jim, on that is that on Israel, not only is there an Iron Dome, there's a Sling of David missile defense system, which I thought Iron Dome was a cool name. Sling of David is a very cool name.
Sling of David,
Yeah, that's pretty awesome.
I'm just hoping Hamas has some program called Goliath.
Exactly. And, The Philistines pretty much existed where Gaza is. I'm just going to say.
Philistines then, Philistines now.
Yes, exactly right. All right, Jim, on to our crazy martini now. And for that, we turn to former President Trump and his Truth Social account yesterday, where with so much happening in the news, he decided to go on at length about being too tough on Bud Light. And so here is his post. I will not make you suffer through my Trump impression. The Bud Light ad was a mistake of epic proportions. And for that, a very big price was paid. But Anheuser-Busch is not a woke company. But I can give you plenty that are. I'm building a list and might just release it for the world to see. Why not? The radical left does it viciously to well-run conservative companies and people. Very nasty, but it's the way they play the game. On the other hand, Anheuser-Busch spends $700 million a year with our great farmers, employs 65,000 Americans, of which 1,500 are veterans, and is a founding corporate partner of Folds of Honor, which provides scholarships for families of fallen servicemen and women. They've raised over $30 million and given 44,000 scholarships. Anheuser-Busch is a great American brand that perhaps deserves a second chance. What do you think? Perhaps instead we should be going after those companies that are looking to destroy America. And so, Jim, a lot of people have reacted to this kind of scratching their heads. First of all, pointing out that while some heads did roll at Anheuser-Busch for the celebrating Dylan Mulvaney specifically for being a woman campaign, there was never an apology or any sort of mea culpa about that whole marketing strategy. Other people have pointed out that Trump's buddy Dana White, who runs UFC, now has Bud Light as a massive sponsor. And you found something else about the campaign in particular that might be a reason why we randomly got this post yesterday.
Sure. Entirely coincidentally, I'm sure, Jeff Miller, a lobbyist for Anheuser-Busch, is hosting a fundraiser for Trump on March 6th. But again, I'm sure that's purely coincidental. I just want to point out, it's not only is Trump going on Truth Social and saying, I love Bud Light, it's fantastic, it's time to forgive them. When he talks about the Folds of Honor program and exactly how much money it's raised and exactly how many scholarships, do you think Trump had that information at his fingertips? Does that seem like the sort of thing that just comes up in casual conversation? Or does it sound like the sort of thing you would hear from a lobbyist for Anheuser-Busch, who, oh, by the way, just happens to be hosting a fundraiser for you? Like, rarely have you ever seen more fingerprints on a Trump, I was going to say Trump tweet. I know it's a Trump social media posting declaring that. Now, I want to establish my what I used to say bona fides, apparently it's bona fides on this, Greg. I have been boycotting Bud Light long before it was cool. Not really out of any issues of trans ideology, but because it tastes like watered down urine. And if you're going to drink beer, it should, at minimum, it should taste like actual urine, not watered down urine, right? That's, it's lesser urine than other ones. So has Bud Light spent enough time in the timeout chair, as I used to do with when I had toddlers, to get it? Or is this just, they bought Trump? They okay, Trump, we'll give you a whole bunch of money. And tell your followers that all is forgiven. And Trump is telling people all is forgiven. And I happen to notice some social folks who are right of center on social media who just decided this morning, hey, yeah, it's time to forgive Bud Light. Now, people can gripe about whatever we do on this podcast, Greg. I'm sure we have flaws, but we don't take orders from anybody. And when somebody's like, yes, sir, we will do, it is time to forgive Bud Light. Look, this is one of the rare cases of the right actually winning a fight. And if Bud Light ceases to exist, I will miss the frogs. I will miss the Bud Bowl. There are aspects of Bud Light's advertising in the past that but beyond that, the beer itself, I have no affection for. So if it dies off from this strikes me as a really useful lesson to corporate America of know your customers. Don't take unnecessary political stances. Don't let your advertising department that has this partisan or ideological axe to grind use your brand to run your company into the ground because they've decided to use it as a vehicle for this kind of partisan or ideological messaging. Go back to the what's up guys. We all love, people love nonpartisan, non-ideological messaging. But no, Trump wants to, okay, all's forgiven. It's all fine. Like, if this is all it takes, then nobody's going to learn anything. The lesson will be write a check to Trump and he'll get you off the hook. That's not what this is supposed to be about. This is supposed to be about stop shoehorning ideological, hard left woke messaging into advertising that's supposed to appeal to everybody.
and they've tried to make a comeback with their ads. Remember, right after that, they did like the most traditional valued ad with the Clydesdales and
now they got Peyton Manning is throwing cans of Bud Light around the bar. God help you if you don't see that coming, right? I'm waiting for the personal injury lawsuit in the follow-up commercial.
Be worse if it's Brett Favre, but he used to throw some missiles out there. But Peyton Manning's on target. Emmitt Smith, I don't know what his arm is like, but he's certainly a durable back. But yeah, I'd be curious to see if Trump had put out a post yesterday condemning Bud Light for whatever reason and saying they need to keep learning their lesson. How many of those same people that stood up and saluted today would have also stood up and saluted, but in the exact opposite direction today? Would have been curious.
I also want to jump in, Greg, and just point out that as a former Jet, I will stand up for Brett Favre, and you'll never see him doing a Bud Light ad because he's too busy stealing welfare from the state of Mississippi.
Jim Garrity, National Review. I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. Thanks so much for being with us today. Do subscribe to our podcast and tell your friends about us as well. We'd love to have them along. Thanks also for your 5-star ratings and your kind reviews. Please keep those coming. Get us on your home devices. All you have to say is play 3 Martini Lunch podcast. Follow us both on X. He's at Jim Garrity. I'm at Dateline_DC. Have a terrific Wednesday and join us again on Thursday for the next 3 Martini Lunch.